Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your business diva, Melanie Collette, broadcasting live via SHR Media and streaming live on Facebook. And I am very happy to have as my guest today, Dr. Charles Page. He is going to talk to us today about physicians' tips to survive coronavirus. Now, if you don't know, and I'm very happy to have him on, and hopefully you guys can see him on the screen. I'm going to double check. Those of you who follow the show regularly know that you usually are only able to see me, but today I'm trying some new technology to see if I can see you. You can see my guest and me, and it looks like you can. At least I'm streaming live on Facebook, and it looks like you can. So I'm very excited about that. Like I said, my guest today is Charles Payne. If you have Charles Page. And if you
people do call me Dr. Payne sometimes.
And of course, you might be thinking to yourself, why are you having a doctor talk about coronavirus on a money show? But if any of you have been paying attention, then certainly you know that that the coronavirus has had a very high impact, to say the least, on people's money these days. Because the government has shut down, many people have lost their jobs, to the tune of, I think we're up to 15 million or maybe more than that, people who have lost their jobs. I personally live in Cape May County, New Jersey, where most of our jobs are tourism. And they're talking about locking us down for the summer, which would have a $6 billion impact on our revenues down here in Cape May County. So it's a big deal. And but we're going to be talking to Dr. Page about the other aspects of coronavirus. So I thought he'd be a really interesting guest to have on the show. So I'm very excited to have him on the show today. Doug Paz, thank you for being in the Facey chat. I see you're in here already. You're the best, and thank you for sharing. So without further ado, Dr. Charles Page, how are you?
I'm great, Melanie. I'm broke, so I can't give you any financial advice today.
I hear you. Trust me. Well, I'm very happy to have you on the show today. And before we get into the meat of the topic, talking about coronavirus and how we can survive that and any other kind of illness, I'd love for you to give the audience a bit of information on your background.
Well, so I'm a general surgeon in small town, Texas. I serve in an underserved area, and I tell people I'm the best guy to see on the worst day of your life. I pretty much do everything. I'm the kind of guy you really don't know exists until something really bad happens, typically. So, yeah, and so I've been married for 25 years to Joanna, and I tell people I'm the best guy to see on the worst day of your life, and she's the best person to see any day of your life. Fortunately, she makes up for all my bad qualities. And then we have 5 kids. We have 2 kids in college. So just got a lot of moving parts, just like everybody.
That's excellent. Now, what kind of doctor are you specifically?
So I'm a surgeon. So, for example, I do trauma surgery. If you come in a car wreck and you need your spleen out, if you have cancer like breast cancer or colon cancer, need your gallbladder out, you need your hernia fixed, you're throwing up blood and you need an endoscopy, or you need a skin lesion removed. The things that most people don't really want to think about on a day-to-day basis, that's what I do. Yeah, no, it's a great conversation. So you have a license to talk about all the stuff that nobody really doesn't talk about very often.
You're a cheery guy for somebody who does that for work. That's
Well, I have my moments. Let me just say that.
I'm sure that you do. That's amazing, though. I really respect people who do the type of work that you do. And I understand you have a book out as well.
Right. So it's kind of funny to kind of deal with all these things going on in my life. I learned that kind of writing was a good way to process these things. And so my first book was on sleep, and this book is about just listening to my patients and hearing their stories. And kind of what I've realized over the years is just the impact that faith makes in a health crisis. And so this is called A Spoonful of Courage for the Sick and Suffering. And they're just stories of my patients, and they're faith-based stories. They're stories that kind of show, um, what faith, hope, and courage make when you're going through something, when you're going through a difficult health crisis, whether it be cancer or COVID virus or, whatever. It's just one of those things. I think so often, we feel alone, we feel out of control, we feel afraid. All these emotions kind of go through our mind, and these stories are just little reminders just to get us back, past our feelings onto the facts. The facts of the scriptures that remind us that God loves us. He's got a plan for all these things, and there's purposes that go beyond sometimes our understanding. So facts, faith, and feelings, and kind of going at it with from that perspective. So the book is for free on Amazon. So my publisher decided just to, that was something that's really needed right now. And so you can pick up the ebook for free. So I'd encourage you to do so.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, like I told you, I'm broke.
So yeah, give it away for free. That sounds like a
well, hey.
Thanks a lot, dude. Well, listen, I want to talk to you about this whole coronavirus thing.
Yep.
And I would imagine, since you are a trauma surgeon, you probably, I don't know that there's any surgeries associated with coronavirus, but I would imagine that you get some COVID positive patients that you've seen some coming into your emergency room.
Absolutely. In the emergency room, in the ICU, I do a lot of work in the ICU. So, I'm also exposed to it. It's kind of weird. You hear the stories in New York and whatever, but you don't think about small town America, being that common. But I remember 10 days ago when I pulled into the hospital and there was a refrigerator truck, and so it is real. I mean, it is a real thing. And this is not the flu. I mean, this is definitely, a more what we call a virulent disease. I mean, it does kill people. Fortunately, there's some good news out there that it's not as bad as what we thought it was going to be, which is good news. But it is a problem, and we are seeing a lot of people. In fact, in our small county, we have 10 deaths and over 100 cases, which is even greater than in some of the more urban areas as far as a percentage. Especially in underserved areas, people think of like urban places like, New York or Chicago, the urban places being underserved, but, rural areas are also underserved as far as physicians and resources. And the people tend to be sicker, and they tend to have less access to healthcare than in bigger places. So we've got a lot of challenges ahead of us.
Yep. While my area is a resort area, it's also what that also means is it's very rural. And we face those same challenges. We're kind of like the last to get anything, even though we're we're way down in the peninsula of New Jersey, and we're like the last to get anything because we're in such a rural area. And so they think to get things to like your more congested areas first, where there's more people. There's just not a lot of people per square mile.
Yeah, people come to Cape May to get away, and that's the downside to it.
Exactly. They come to get away from people, and it's a good place to get away from people. But unfortunately, if you have a health crisis or something like that down here, it's just not as fantastic of care as if you were in Center City, Philadelphia.
Yep. It's all about resources.
So how do we know if we suspect that we have coronavirus? How do we know to come to the ER and come see you? How do we know that it's not? Because I think with us watching it on the news and everything, as soon when I wake up in the morning, I'm like, sometimes it's allergy season. Sometimes your nose is a little bit stuffed up. You're like, oh my God, do I have it?
Yeah, me too. I'm the same way. I had to get tested 2 or 3 weeks ago because I was having fevers, and I'd been in the ICU around these patients, and I was afraid. I had to get tested. And so, those things go through our minds. First thing I would recommend to people is not to panic, So just keep in mind that 80 to 90% of patients, even more, are going to be asymptomatic. They're going to have minimal symptoms. So we don't know how many people really have had the virus and don't even know it. So that is the $1 million question that everyone's trying to figure out. So number one, don't panic. If you're not super sick, I mean, if you're not like short of breath and having terrible fevers, I would probably not go to the emergency room, because they're not going to do a lot for you. They're probably going to treat you and street you. Probably better to call your primary care doctor if you have a primary care doctor, or look at one of the online things. Now, most counties have a site that you can call and actually talk with them over the phone, and they have criteria that will tell you whether you need to come to the emergency room or not. But here's the thing: if you don't have the virus and you go to the emergency room, you may be exposed to the virus and then really get sick. So of course, this is one of those things you really can't stop a virus. I mean, the whole kind of strategy here of flattening the curve, we knew that we couldn't really decrease the number of people that would get the disease. We could just draw it out so that we wouldn't overwhelm the resources that we have. And so that was kind of the whole idea of flattening the curve. So, but in general, call your primary care doctor. There's online venues now. A lot of the state governments have kind of relaxed a lot of those, telephone conversations and Zoom conversations and all those things with primary care doctors. And then also look at your county's information, and they may help you. But don't. I mean, the knee-jerk response was, "I'm sick, go to the emergency room." And this is one of those cases where, if at all possible, don't do that.
The last place in the world I want to go is to the hospital. Like I thought.
Now you're talking.
I thought I had I woke up with a pain, which, as a woman of a certain age, it happens.
I'm having a lot of those issues too.
You wake up, and sometimes you just have this arbitrary pain, just somewhere when you wake up, and you're like, oh my God, do I need to go to the hospital? No, I'm not going to the hospital, because that's where Corona lives. So.
And that's what the kind of the focus you need to have
is to not, because you really don't. I mean, my thing is, you just don't want to go pick it up, right?
Right.
And so, like you said, who decides whether or not you actually get admitted? Let's just say you wake up, you have all the symptoms, you have the fever, you have the cough, you're short of breath. Then you, like you said earlier, you want to call somebody. You want to call a private care physician before you actually go into the emergency room. Who actually decides, okay, this person needs to be admitted, and what kind of criteria do they use for that?
Well, so, of course, that's going to vary from institution to institution. At one of our institutions, I mean, they're CAT scanning people, because a lot of times the X-ray findings kind of lag the CT scan findings. I mean, the interstitial pneumonitis or the early ARDS are things that sometimes you can't see on an early chest X-ray, because there's a lag time between.
Now, what are those in English? What are those?
Oh, don't ask interstitial pneumonitis. Don't ask me to spell that. I'm a surgeon. Okay, just made me sound smart. Okay, but the point is, I mean, they'll check your blood gases. I mean, they'll do we call a pulse ox. Put a thing on your finger, check your oxygen saturation. They'll do some basic labs if you're really sick, and then determine whether you warrant admission or not. And usually that's if you have a low oxygen saturation. If you're your CAT scan or your chest X-ray suggests if you've got other comorbidities. A lot of times, that's another thing they kind of weigh into the equation. We know that most people that are pretty healthy are going to be fine. They're going to be able to treat on an outpatient basis.
Comorbidities are like comorbidities. Is what you said. Is like other things that are wrong with you. Basically.
Yeah, like lung disease, like obesity has been shown. So to affect it, of course, kidney disease, heart disease, if you've had cancer and been on chemotherapy, of course, all those kind of things are going to be, weighed into the equation and make you at higher risk for getting sick, with the virus.
What about something like autoimmune deficiencies like lupus, and there's another one called BARD? Something.
Epstein-Barr. So here's the deal. So what's interesting about this, the medicines, hydroxychloroquine, which is Plaquenil, that's a medicine that we give for lupus. And so, and we're finding apparently that some of these people who are on these medicines, it kind of suppresses the immune system for some reason. Some people who get this virus just get this crazy kind of immune response. It's kind of way out of what you would expect for having a viral disease, and their lungs just kind of go haywire, and they get the respiratory distress and all that. So, but we think the medications, the hydroxychloroquine, kind of blunts that effect. So people that are already on, like say, Plaquenil for lupus, are in a sense kind of protected. And there's been some discussion about, well, do we give people Plaquenil or chloroquine, which is the malaria medicine, to kind of prophylax and prevent people from getting it?
I have a friend who, I have a close relative actually, who has lupus, and I was really concerned about her until I had kind of heard that if you're on, there's some medications that you take for lupus that are kind of prophylactically protect you, because usually, as sure you know, as a physician, I don't know if the audience knows, but things like lupus, the flu, pneumonia, anything like that can take you out. Yeah,
and that's the thing. I mean, if you're immunosuppressed to begin with, or if your immune system's kind of not working normally, it can work either way. I mean, fortunately, in the case of people with lupus, they're on a medication that seems to protect it. And so what they believe the medicine does is the medicine binds to proteins that keep the virus from attaching to cells. So it doesn't stop the virus. It just kind of slows it down so that, that the body can kind of grow in its immunity, quicker, have time to respond.
For once, she lucked up with the lupus.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell you, lupus is a bad disease.
Yeah, it's not a good.
It's one of those. I'm glad I'm a surgeon. I don't have to deal with that very often, because it's hard to, you can't fix it. I like, I like to deal with things I can fix. So
right, you can go in and sew it up and it's fixed, right?
Yeah. That's a very, I like tangible things.
Yeah, lupus, and lupus is kind of like, along with a lot of immunodepressed kind of diseases, is really, it's not fixable, really. It's a lifelong kind of battle. And anytime something like this comes along, it's really scary.
But there are some things that show that people who don't have that hyperimmune response may actually do better, with this. We'll see. I think we'll know probably in 5 years once all the studies are done.
Oh my goodness! How long it takes you people so long to get the studies done? Let's go.
I know, Melanie. The wheels of medicine move really slow.
That's just bureaucracy. So
yes, ma'am.
I can totally relate. So let's say you talk to the doctor. The doctor thinks you might have COVID, but you're not quite sick enough to go to the hospital. So you have to stay home and deal with this fever and this cough and everything else that comes with COVID. How do you deal with that at home?
So, the main thing is just try to, sequester yourself, fluids, Tylenol's good. There's some people initially that were saying that maybe, ibuprofen may make it worse. I don't know if there's any studies that back that up, but just simple things like you would do for the flu, just rest, fluids, maybe some Tylenol, just simple things, trying to not expose yourself to other people. You may or may not be tested. I mean, that depends upon your physician. I mean, there are some people now that are arguing that we need to start testing people so that the people who don't have COVID can get back out in the workforce and make a paycheck. And, people that are high risk and the people that do have COVID can be, sequestered and quarantined. So, but you may or may not be tested. Initially we weren't testing anybody, and they were just, being quarantined for 2 weeks. And so that is acceptable to do that. Hopefully we'll move towards testing here in the near future so that we can kind of get, once again, control this and then get back out in the workforce. Because we got to get to work.
We do have to get to work. It's a tricky thing now, because
it is.
If you tell people to come in and get tested, well, then you're at risk of people shedding the virus, right? While they're there getting tested.
Yes. Of course, we use precautions when you're testing people. You use what we call the PPEs. That's a new word I never even knew existed. Personal protective equipment. I didn't know that existed until the virus started. But you wear the mask and all those things. So, for example, in the office now, we routinely wearing masks. When patients come in, not so much because we're afraid of them giving us the virus, but more of us transmitting the virus to them if we have it and don't know it. So it's a real challenge.
How do you feel about the mask? Because it seems to have been some mixed messages early on about the mask situation. The Surgeon General, love the Surgeon General. I think he's a great guy. But at first,
he's an anesthesiologist. Right. Anesthesiologists always want to be surgeons. I'm just going to add that. But anyway, no, but he's a great guy. So this is an N95 mask, and so the N95 mask is something they use like for asbestos abatement. So if you notice here, it has a very good seal. And that's kind of one of the things. So these masks are good to keep a person from getting the disease, right? So these are more of the other masks. There's all different kinds of. We had a lady to make these for us today. A lady from church made these masks for us today. But you see, these really, it's hard to get a good seal, so the virus can get in around your nose and your eyes and stuff. And so, but it's a good thing. Like it'll prevent you. Like if you cough, it'll keep that virus, the respiratory droplets, from getting out in the air. So there's benefits of both. This is more what we're going to use in the hospital when we're like having to do a procedure with a person who has, the virus. So anyway,
that's a good explanation for once.
Good.
So it depends on the kind of mask as far as what the purpose is.
And that's my take on it. I'm sure you talk to 5 different doctors, you get 10 different answers. And initially, these are uncharted waters. The government said it really wasn't that necessary to wear a mask, and now they kind of backtracked on it. And so no one really knows exactly what the right answer is. I think the social distancing is a good idea for now. Just once again, slowing down the rate of transmission of the virus, I think, is the best plan.
I like that. By the way, Karen Buckingham in the Facey chat, she's a good friend of mine, and she's in the Facebook chat. She says that she finds your voice very relaxing and reassuring. She said,
well, thanks, Karen. I've got some snake oil, I'll say you. How's that?
She said to tell you that she appreciates all his advice. No, the advice on a mask is really good because I think it was really confusing. Because I don't think it was meant to be really confusing, but it just was really confusing as far as what the doctors were saying. Like the mask is good, the mask isn't. And what I hear you saying is it depends on what kind of mask it is. The kind of mask that most of us are getting, what I hear you saying is to protect other people from getting it.
It's probably not going to keep you from getting the virus, but it will keep you from transmitting the virus. And so but there is a benefit in that. And so I think, it's worth wearing the mask. And that's the whole thing. 90% of us are going to be fine. We're going to get the virus and maybe have the sniffles and maybe a low grade fever. We may not even know that we get the virus. But the thing is, it's just, you go see grandma and grandma is not going to do well with the virus, or you have your cousin who you see who has, just has breast cancer and just been on chemotherapy. Those are going to be the people that are going to be hit hard. And so that's the whole point of wearing a mask.
That's exactly right. And the thing is, you can't tell who is recovering from some type of chemo. You can't always tell, or who has something like that. It's hard to tell. Like my relative that has lupus is you would not know that she has lupus. She's perfectly healthy otherwise.
Right.
So you wouldn't know that she's somebody that maybe you should stay away from if you're shedding the virus. And it used to be before Corona came along that if you weren't contagious, at least as a school teacher, you become a germ professional.
Teachers and pediatricians, they get it all. They get sick.
We're undocumented pediatricians. But usually the rule of thumb as teachers is if you don't have a fever, you're not contagious. That's generally the rule of thumb.
Show up for work, yeah.
Right, exactly. If you don't have a fever, you're fine. If you have a fever, then no, it's a no-go. Same with the kids. But now with COVID, that's just not the case.
Yes, and that's therein lies the rub. I mean, you can be contagious for, weeks and not even know it, not even have any symptoms.
That is totally insane. I'm just I'm just saying.
Yes, ma'am. That is, and that's, and it's one of those things. It's, you can't stop a virus, and so the best strategy that we had was to try to slow it down, so that, if you did get sick, we wouldn't, we wouldn't overwhelm our ICUs and ventilators. I mean, you don't want doctors to be making decisions about, taking granny off the breathing machine to give a ventilator to a 30-year-old. We don't want to make those kind of decisions. And so, fortunately, if we can slow it down enough, then we don't have to make those decisions. I mean, people are going to die. We've got, what, the death rate's, 48,000 now. I mean, that's a pretty high toll.
That is a pretty high number. And how does that compare to the flu? Because a lot of people,
Right.
want to say that it's kind of like the flu, but I think it seems to me that number is a bit higher than the flu.
So I think the flu numbers are about 60,000 a year, I believe. But here's the thing: as a physician, I don't see that. I don't see people dying of the flu, especially as a surgeon. Maybe because of my specialty, but I don't go in the ICU and see people on the ventilator with the flu. Or maybe it's just maybe not made it. We don't make as big a deal about it. But when I walk through our ICU, man, we've got 4 or 5 COVID patients on vents. And I think that's so there is a difference. There is a distinguishing, thing. And they actually take these viruses and they number them like, and once again, I'm not a virologist. Okay. I'm a surgeon. So, but, they take them like, like the flu is like a 1, and like the COVID virus is like a 5. So it's much more easily, transmitted than, than the flu.
Now, I think what would be interesting, and I don't know if you have these numbers or not, or have any idea about this, would be to find out how the flu numbers are doing this year in comparison to COVID. Like, are there people who are getting COVID both instead of the flu? You know what I mean?
Yeah, when there's still people getting the flu. I don't know those numbers, but I do know that, and that's a lot of people that are like, well, hey, this is no different than the flu. And my argument for that, and I think that most people are saying, hey, we're not finished with this yet. This is because we've flattened the curve. I mean, we're going to be seeing, cases, throughout the summer.
Yeah, that's the scary part. Like I said, I live in a resort area, so
yeah.
Assuming that we end up opening up, I don't know. Our governor's kind of up in the air on that, but assuming that we open up over the summer, we're going to have people from all over the place down here. I mean, we have people from Canada. I don't know, our border closed, so maybe not from Canada this year, but from all over the country come to Cape May County.
Right.
As a resort area, and especially from New York and North Jersey and places like that. So I would think
Philly, all over.
I would think that our numbers could end up going up. It's just that part is a little bit scary, but like you said, we have to open up at some point.
We do. And and so the whole strategy was, once again, we didn't want to overwhelm ICUs, because you take 333 million people in the United States and you do the numbers and do the math. That's a lot of people on ventilators. Now, and so, just slowing that down over time is going to make a big difference. I mean, like I said, we can't stop the virus. There's no way we're going to be able to do that, but we can minimize the effect that it takes on our ICUs. Now we're weighing that balance of, what do we do with our economy? Fortunately, in Texas, we're kind of opening up things a little bit. So we'll see. I guess Texas will be the guinea pig. We'll find out what happens.
You live in a great state of Texas. Anybody who's a card carrying conservative loves Texas. Like, I love Texas. Everyone loves Texas. At least, like I said, card carrying conservatives like myself.
Yeah, we have shotguns. We still have shotguns on the back of our truck.
You guys are still allowed to carry and everything else, aren't you? Don't you?
I think there's some new open carry rules in Texas. So anyway,
that's flipping amazing, man.
Crazy.
You can't even have a gun in New Jersey. Like you can't, you basically have to like sell your firstborn to get a gun in New Jersey. It's a terrible, terrible thing. So I want to know why it is that you call yourself the best guy to see on the worst day of your life. I think Karen Buckingham, who's watching the show on Facebook, kind of touched on it. You have a very soothing and relaxing way. Like if I'm in a car crash and my foot was over my shoulder and it's not supposed to be because my legs broke.
Is that bad? Well, Karen, it's all smoke and mirrors, you know.
Not supposed to be here. Yeah, I think I would want to see you. I think you.
Well, let me tell you a story. So Christmas time, I went in to see a patient in his room, and he looked familiar, and he smiled at me and said, "Hey, Doc, I hadn't seen you in 10 years." And he just looked so happy. He was just like, "Wow, I hadn't seen you in 10 years." He was like throwing a party, and I was like, it kind of hurt my feelings, you know, like, what? I mean, you haven't seen me in 10 years? That's terrible. I mean, and he says, no, the last time you saw me, you chopped my leg off. So that kind of explains. I mean, typically when I'm peering over your bedside, it's usually not something good. You know, so, and I kind of have a ringside seat to see sickness and suffering and people at their best and at their worst. And so that's kind of what's kind of provoked me to do some writing and kind of pursuing, you know, kind of promoting, you know, spoonfuls.
I love it. I love it. That's absolutely positive because people don't think about those things that are.
Well, it's kind of like me. It's kind of like, you know, no one thinks about a general surgeon until you need surgery. No one thinks about, you know, about reading a book on sickness and suffering until, guess what, the COVID virus comes. Well, so, you know, we're all like that. I mean, I think we all, you know, we tend to not think about those things. We don't think about, you know, like you have doing money. We don't think about saving money until, you know, we're having some financial issues, you know, that's just our human nature.
Now, as a doctor, you take care of, like you said, you like to have the tangibles. That's one of the things that you like about your specialty is that it's tangible. You can say, okay, this is broken. How can I go in and fix it? And you can fix it. But are there some intangible things that you can tell the audience about that helps you heal? And when things like having coronavirus or any of the other things that you fix, is there a non-tangible side to that?
Oh yeah. So, you know, like we were just talking about, you know, looking, you know, so often when we go through a health crisis, kind of what I've seen, what I've observed is that when we look inward, you know, when we're worried about our own problems, you know, hey, what's your dog's name?
Denny. And you know what? He has a bark collar.
Oh, he does?
The audience knows Denny very well.
Oh, okay. Well, I've never seen Denny. So anyway,
he'll be over
okay. Where was I? Okay, so okay. Now I've got having a senior moment.
He took his bark collar off. I was like, why is he barking? And I look over on the floor just now, and his bark collar's on the floor.
Okay, now let me just ask you a question, Melanie. What is a bark collar?
A bark collar? Oh,
yeah.
It's a collar that he wears to prevent him from barking, but he's very smart.
I need one of those for my kids. Can you get one of those for your kids? Okay, you're fixing to stop the interview now. Okay, so what were we talking about?
We were talking about intangibles that help you heal. I apologize for Denny's
rude. No. It's funny. So anyway, looking inward, you know, when we look inward and we get introspective and we start focusing on our problems and everything, it's just overwhelming. And so first we have to look upward and we have to look for, you know, God's truth and, you know, the fact that God, you know, man, he's not doing things to us. He's doing things for us. And he knows better. He's got a bigger plan and a bigger picture than, you know. And so first looking upward and looking at God's promises and the fact that he loves us and, you know, sickness, we're never going to understand sickness and suffering on this side of heaven. We just aren't, you know. So, but the people who really do better, so this is the kind of the intangible thing, the people who really do well are the people that move from looking inward to upward to outward. They're looking to, you know, encourage other people. You know, I've seen this. let me tell you a story. So my mother died of lung cancer about 4 years ago. Never smoked, healthy as a horse. She had the weird kind of lung cancer. Once again, I'm a surgeon. I like to fix things. I couldn't fix this. And here it is. My mother's dying of lung cancer. And I had this lady come in my office. Her name's Catherine, and she had locally advanced breast cancer. And Catherine, she just really didn't think about herself. I mean, she just kind of delayed things because she was ready to go. She felt like it was her time. And so here she was, with breast cancer. And she found out that my mother had breast cancer. And what's interesting is the conversation never revolved around her issues, never revolved around her chemotherapy or her surgery or her prognosis. She just really didn't think about herself at all. Instead, she thought about my mother. And so Catherine had this weird habit. She would go around and pick up pecans by the river. I mean, this was kind of her time of fellowshipping with God. She'd pick up these little sacks of pecans, and you knew when she brought you a sack of pecans, that meant she was thinking about you and praying about you. And every time she came in, she'd bring me these pecans, and that did so much for me because I was in a situation with my mother that I couldn't, I'm saying, I couldn't understand and I couldn't control and I couldn't change. And yet the fact that here was somebody the same age as my mother dying of cancer, and she was thinking about me and my mother. You know what I'm saying? And to me, that lady did so well. She thrived in the midst of her cancer, and she ultimately died of her cancer. And my mother ultimately died of her cancer. But I just think about that, and I think about the effect that had on me. And in a sense, the effect that had on her, I think that helped her keep going. The fact that she had a purpose, even in her sickness, she wasn't focusing on herself. She was focusing on other people. And I think that made the difference.
I think that has to be so hard to focus on, excuse him.
Hi, Denny.
Hi, Denny. Denny, since you want to talk, come here. I'm going to introduce the audience to Denny.
Show Denny. We need to see him.
Denny, come here. Come on, come here. Since you want to talk so much.
Yes, Doug. Lots of minerals that are bioavailable.
Here's the little loudmouth.
Hey, Denny. I love it.
Sounds of loudmouth who took his bark collar off. He usually has it on during the show, and he's usually quite fine. Usually sitting on my lap, chilling out. No, not today. Not when I have the good doctor on. You want to be noisy today.
Kept and happy.
And I apologize to the people who are listening to this via a download via iTunes or iHeartRadio, and you cannot see the ultimate cuteness. His name is Denny. It's short for Denzel because he's the most handsome boy ever, named after the actor.
Oh, that's funny.
Now that he's on my lap, he'll probably be fine for the rest of the show. I'm sorry about that. But you were saying that think ultimately thinking above and thinking outside of yourself.
But I mean, and that's the case, I think, is when we begin to look at how we can influence other people. And sickness brings up a lot of opportunities that we don't think about. And one of those is being able to influence others. We have that opportunity to influence. And I've seen it so many times. Mom and dad are at the bedside and, they're able to mend fences and, relational things with people. And, that's such a great opportunity that we get when we're suffering. It's also an opportunity to grow spiritually. We grow in maturity, isn't it funny how many things we take for granted, even in this crisis? I mean, I've realized how many things that I've taken for granted. A paycheck, paycheck. I mean, just all kinds of things we take for granted, Melanie. And, I think we're going to realize that I think we're going to be richer and stronger when we kind of go through this.
A lot of the COVID patients don't even get to say goodbye to their loved ones if the ultimate happens as a result of COVID and they end up passing away.
And that's one of the weird things about this disease. You walk through the hospitals now, they're empty because we don't want people to be in the hospitals. And so people are in the ICU and they're sick and they're suffering and they're alone, at least from standpoint of loved ones. And it's even different as a physician because we can't find we don't have the family there. Usually the family's, in the ICU waiting room or wherever, and they're not there. And so it's a very different kind of feeling as far as even from a practitioner standpoint and even from a patient standpoint.
I can't imagine that part is the most heartbreaking part for me. That you don't get to be surrounded by loved ones and know that somebody, or not even get somebody to come visit you and come in with balloons or, a card or whatever while you're in the hospital with this sickness.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I want people to remember with this book, and kind of one of the things to remind us is that we're not alone. Even though we may be isolated, we're not alone. And there's a difference between those two, spiritually speaking. That God's not going to leave us or forsake us. And, for those who are Christians, we have that promise. And I think that's a great thing to remember. But it's a different kind of a paradigm, because even as a physician, you're used to talking with families, and so much of what we do is not just talking with the patients, but talking with their families, because they're also suffering in a way. And so it puts a whole different dynamic. The virus and the kind of the social restrictions that we're facing right now put a whole different dynamic on this.
Yeah, I did that part is just truly, truly heartbreaking. So tell us again where we can get the book. And actually, the first book that we were talking about, and I do want to talk about the importance of sleep too, because I think I don't know about you because you're actually going to work every day, but my whole sleep schedule is completely messed up. So
I'm a surgeon. Hey, they call me at 2:00 in the morning just to see what I'm up to, but so this book is a book called Surrendered Sleep, and it just kind of goes through what the scriptures say about sleep. It's interesting, I say sleep was God's idea. So it kind of goes through biblical principles, things that help us to understand, how to deal with sleep, and those things more from a spiritual standpoint. It's interesting though, everything affects our sleep. I'm one of those do as I say, not as I do kind of doctors. What's the interesting thing that I didn't know, even after I read the book. Get this, I read the book, and here it is. I'm probably the most biggest hypocrite in the world, but I had sleep apnea and I didn't know it. I thought I had my nose fixed. I had some Roto-Rooter in my nose, and I thought it was going to fix my sleep, and it did, but I still had underlying sleep apnea. And there's a lot of people that have a sleep disorder that don't even know it. And it's amazing how your sleep affects everything. Now since I've gotten my sleep apnea fixed, man, I'm so much less irritable. That's not good for a surgeon.
You're actually sleeping at night?
I'm sleeping at night and I'm feeling better, and it's amazing the difference that it can make when you get a good night's sleep. So the one advice I would give you from a medical standpoint is, man, if you're not sleeping right, go have your pulse checked and go talk to somebody about it. Doesn't mean they're going to give you sleeping pills. there's a lot that can be done now. There's over 1,000 different sleep disorders. So that's the first thing. Make sure something medically is okay.
How do you know if you're not getting good sleep? How do you know if you're not? Because sometimes I think we don't necessarily. You're like, I went to bed at 10. 10 is usually my goal. Went to bed at 10. I got up at 6. That's a solid 8 hours. I should be good to go. But then you're not.
Everybody's different. But let me say this: if you're waking up tired and you're not, you just wake up and you want to go back to bed, that's probably a sign. We call that hypersomnia. That's probably a sign that if you're taking naps during the day, you just, that's probably a sign that you may need to get checked out. And so, that's a good thing to do. It's a good thing to go see someone. There are sleep specialists now that do this, primary care doctors, just talk with them and make sure, there's so much stigma about not being able to sleep that people think that, there's something, I'm crazy or something. And it may not be that at all. There's a lot of things that race through our minds as we go to sleep that rob us of sleep. I could tell you all the things that keep me up at night worrying, about patients, about things in my practice, about my family. All those things. And so that's one of the things that I talk about a lot in the book is about, spiritual, ways to kind of deal with those things as we put our heads in our pillow.
Oh, wow. That's I never thought about the fact that you could be sleeping all night, and if you don't wake up rested, that means you probably didn't really sleep. Because I'm always thinking, I slept 8 hours. Why am I so tired?
Right. So we know that going down in the deeper levels of sleep is where you really get that restorative kind of feeling, and so where your body begins to heal and your brain begins to kind of shut down and everything. And so a lot of people never get down to those deeper levels of sleep. Like, for example, sleep apnea, when your muscles begin to relax, when you breathe in, it just cuts off your airway and you choke. So you never get down into those deeper levels of sleep, even though if you think that you're sleeping and you're there for 8 hours, you may never be getting that we call that REM sleep, that deep sleep, when you dream and stuff.
Now, are there any other signs or symptoms of sleep apnea that you might make you more prone to having sleep apnea, or the only way to know that you might be having a problem is if you're not well rested?
Weight. It really is. I mean, we tend to be obese. Once again, do as I say, not as I do. If I could just cut down on the cream in the coffee that I drink during the day, but it's weight. A lot of it, as we get older, our necks get thicker and it gets more, weight there. There are some people though that have other problems that cause sleep apnea. A lot of people, like for example, they have, nasal problems and nasal obstructions or nasal polyps and things like that.
Oh.
Some people have a really short jaw. Like for example, when anesthesiologists put people to sleep, they look at their jaw, and sometimes if you have a real kind of a short jaw, you're more prone to get sleep apnea. So there's a lot of different things to look at.
Oh, that's incredible. Okay, so tell us again where to get both books.
CharlesWPage.com or spoonfulofcourage.com. Like I said, my book is for free right now. My ebook is for free. So yeah, just go. Like I said, I'm broke. Go ahead and just grab one. If you want to give me an Amazon review, that would be great. But
good idea.
Always could use a review. But yeah, just go to Amazon. You can check them out, or you can find them at charleswpage.com.
And is there anywhere we can follow you, like on Facebook, Twitter, any social media where we can follow you? Because you have plenty of time to be doing that as a surgeon. I'm sure.
Well, actually, I've had a lot of time recently. So we're actually starting a doctor's show on Facebook. And so we're starting that on Fridays at 3:30 on my Facebook page. Don't ask me how. I'm the most technologically challenged person on the planet. So don't ask me where that is.
What's your name on your Facebook page? Because I have a feeling that Karen Buckingham is going to want to follow that.
It's a Spoonful of Courage, I believe. Yeah, or Charles W. Page, I believe.
And you're going to be doing your show there?
On Friday, yeah. We're going to have a grief specialist. That's the stuff I talk about, death and dying. I think money's a lot better thing to talk about.
Well, listen, we're all going to face that ultimate end at some point. So know someone who was going through that at some point. So it's a good thing to not make it taboo. It's actually a good thing to talk about, especially if you talk about it in a spiritual context as well. I think that's fantastic. It's needed.
Absolutely. Well said.
I want to thank you so much for being on the show. You did such a great job. I'm sorry my dog is so rude.
Man, it was nice to meet Denny. I was hearing Denny in the background like, you got to show us Denny. That's the whole, yeah, that's cool.
I used to have a dog named Asha, and she was very quiet all the time. She never barked. As long as she was on my lap, she was good. And she never barked. But everybody knew Asha, and unfortunately she had cancer.
I got you. Well,
yeah.
I'm a big Denzel Washington fan too. Is that who you was named after, Denzel Washington?
Yes.
Yeah, good.
I didn't name him, but when I got him, that was his name, and I just kept it. I liked it, so I kept it. I shortened it to Denny because kids, because dogs respond better to the EY, from what I understand, and he does. So, but I apologize for him being so rude. You did such a fantastic job on the show today. I appreciate you so much. All the information was just fantastic.
Thank you, Melanie. It's good to be a guest.
Thank you very much. Listen, you have a great day.
Okay.
I want to thank everybody for listening to the show. I want to thank everybody for watching the show. If you are listening to this via a download, I want to thank you for supporting the show through any of the podcast platforms, iTunes, iHeartRadio. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you guys in the Facey chat for participating. You're the best. My faithful Facey audience, you guys are awesome. And I want you all to remember that this is all very important because after all, it's your money. Have a great day. Let's stop this.